Awesome. Well, this is our fourth recording of the podcast, Thomas, and thank you very much for being here. I guess I'll just introduce, Thomas, what the podcast is about and why we're doing this. We've got the opportunity to share with the Canadian public through this, through vlog and through podcast, the problems with the Canadian healthcare system in relation to psilocybin access. And I feel like you are probably the most important person that we talk to today as the first Canadian to get legal access to psilocybin through Section 56 and be treated back in 2020. So the idea of the podcast is to fully explain the landscape, to educate the people who are listening, the citizens of Canada, politicians, other doctors, other potential patients too, and to let them know how they can help us in this challenge, this constitutional challenge, but also the greater fight to get access to psilocybin in Canada. So I'm just going to set a little bit of the stage. We've got a real problem in this country when doctors and patients, such as yourself and your doctor, don't have the autonomy of choosing the treatments that work best for you. Even when your doctor might decide that psilocybin is a reasonable medical decision, unfortunately, we've got to go to the government and ask them if it's okay for you to try, eating magic mushrooms. And we have to hope that there's a compassionate minister up there like Patty Hyju who granted you your original exemption. And so this is a problem because Canada claims to be a patient-centered healthcare jurisdiction, but then it goes ahead and ignores people like you. We also have the right to die in Canada with medical assistance in dying. So why would we grant people the access or the ability to medical assistance in dying, but not to mushrooms? And this is all really reminiscent of cannabis too, where we know what the laws were in cannabis. We know how they applied. We knew we had charter rights. We even saw legal cannabis stores opening up, just like we've got these legal shroom stores, like the one down the street from me. And quite frankly, now we've got you and 7 other plaintiffs in a charter challenge, suing the Minister of Health and the Government of Canada and challenging the laws that prohibit psilocybin. Thomas, you are the leader of this, and it is wonderful to have you. I would absolutely love for you to maybe just introduce yourself.
Well, as usual, it's always a treat chatting with you, Spencer. Again, my name is Thomas Hartle, and as you said, I've been fortunate enough to be the first Canadian to have access to legal psilocybin-assisted therapy here in Canada. And the changes that has made to my quality of life are something that is just amazing to me. There's really very few words that are dramatic and drastic enough to describe the difference from how it is before I had psilocybin therapy and to the way things feel for me now. It literally has been something that has given me back the quality of life that cancer and end-of-life anxiety and all of these things had taken away from me. And as a result had really taken away from my family as well. So when we're looking at treating these conditions, you have to take into account that we're not just treating people like myself. You are also treating and changing the lives of the people around us as well. And that, I think, is something that has been really sort of overlooked in this. It's wonderful and amazing that the psilocybin therapy has improved my quality of life, but it has also restored my ability to interact with my family and my friends, and to be able to do the kind of lobbying and things that I'm currently doing. I never really would have had the energy or the state of mind to be able to do these things if it were not for being able to access a medication that has largely, I would like to say that it has eliminated the anxiety from my life, but the fact of the matter is it is something that does return over time. And again, that is one of the reasons why we are trying to get the laws changed to make access to the therapy quicker and easier and more available to people. Because while I had my first treatment in 2020, to date I have had 6 legal therapeutic sessions. The most recent one here would have been at the start of October, and so we're looking just a couple of weeks ago. I do find that I need a refresher about every 6 months, and having to go through this whole process every 6 months to get access to a treatment is it's ridiculous, honestly.
And it's gotten more difficult, right? Because, I mean, you had a Section 56, which was more of a blanket exemption back in 2020.
Yeah.
And now it's the SAP, which would you say is worse or better? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's not even the SAP anymore. So my first go-round, I got the Section 56, and that gave me access for 1 year. So I could legally have a therapeutic session anytime I needed one during that year. And that was actually pretty good. That's on the scale of things, while it didn't give me access to the psilocybin itself and didn't necessarily give me access to a therapist to perform the service, I had to find those on my own. It did allow me to access it any time during that year. That was a good part. Then they closed down access to the Section 56s and put the onus on the SAP program, the Special Access Program, like you say. And I accessed my first treatment in that through the Roots to Thrive organization. Now, when it came time to do a second session through the Roots to Thrive organization, the government is now saying, whoa, we don't want to do the special access program for this. Now you're going to have to turn this into a clinical trial. So they have been sort of slowly closing down the different avenues of access to this, and that really feels like we're going in reverse somehow. I understand that they're trying to get things, I guess, standardized in some sort of a way. But to now make everybody go through a clinical trial process is not giving access to the medicine. It's making it more complicated. So if you thought it was difficult getting a Section 56, it is more difficult finding a doctor to fill out the special access program. Well, now it's going to be more difficult still to find a clinical trial that is accepting patients.
So this is really interesting because, there's what Health Canada tells us, what they try to communicate to these doctors. And then there's at the same time the government, the broader government, the MPs, the ministers who will say something else. And Thomas, I think this is really interesting. And again, the point of this podcast is to try and clarify and make things very, very clear. We started off, again, you're right, it is a full loop, saying clinical trials wouldn't work. We were granted Section 56. They said we were going to do SAP next because it was going to be better and an improvement. Now it's back to clinical trials. And this is all happening. One thing that I do want to correct is Section 56 is still open. It is always open. And I think it's worth noting that because Section 56 is about compassionate access. Mm. And I think that's something that I feel like in the last 2 years, we've almost lost sight of. This is about compassion, right? And the SAP is less compassionate. It's more technicalities and guidelines. And famously, one of the doctors we're working with, the bureaucrats at Health Canada were saying, the guidelines say you can't access this. And the doctor kind of said, well, what kind of doctor are you? I'm sorry to do this. And they said, well, I'm a pharmacologist and we follow the guidelines. And the doctor very correctly said, well, I'm a doctor and I'm a human being and I'm trying to do what's compassionate here. Mm-hmm. And I really think that that's what I want to, try and bring it back to. So you have a Section 56 still open, or at least that you've sent.
I have a request for a Section 56.
Yeah.
It's just that it's been completely ignored.
For how long?
Um, I it has been more than a year now since I sent in my application for renewal on that one. It was easily last October.
And
It
so
was it
last,
was October of 21. So I guess it's been just about exactly a year. Um, they took 6 months to respond to the application in any way. We had a little bit of brief interaction. They asked some questions. I answered some questions, and now they are just completely non-communicative again.
and,
So
and who
while
did you
it's
send it
true
to?
that Section 56 still exists and it is an option, um, it's it's administratively not an option.
Hmm. And this is because, we send it to the minister, right? Caroline Bennett and Jean-Yves Duclos,
Mhm.
and it is up to them to respond. But have you ever heard anything back from them?
Never. No, no. I've heard from some of the administrative staff at the Department of Controlled Substances, but to date, I have never had any response from either of the actual ministers.
And so, what do you think the importance of compassionate access to psilocybin, or maybe even other substances? Do you believe that that's important in our Canadian healthcare system, and how has it impacted you? I mean, how has the lack of compassion impacted you?
Well, I'd have to say that it has made me a little cynical of the system. Um, Honestly, if you are looking at any of the types of conditions that psilocybin seems to have a good history of being successful in treating. So you're looking at things like end of life distress. So people like myself who are terminal, literally dying people. People who are dealing with substance abuse, so addictions. People dealing with treatment resistant depression or chronic pain through cluster headaches. So these are all examples of things that have a very proven track record through a lot of studies done uh, during the 60s and 70s before the prohibition was in place, and more recently with uh, places like Johns Hopkins and some of the other studies that have taken place. There is good evidence that this is something that helps people like myself. Now, if there is a treatment that helps people who are suffering and dying, literally, that is kind of the definition of compassion. This is the only thing that I have found that works. And if it is a matter of, well, I have said this before, and I think it's a good example. If you have a family pet who has got age and arthritis, it's not so unusual for you to show a little compassion and give it like a aspirin or something like that from your veterinarian to treat that. It's just showing simple compassion for another living being, and relieving the suffering of them is no different from relieving the suffering of an actual person like myself. It isn't asking for a lot. It's just asking for enough compassion to relieve suffering.
And they gave you this exact same exemption in 2020. I mean, it's almost, I don't know. It really frustrates me because it always strikes me that when we talk to Help Canada, we're not talking to a single
Yep.
human being who has the ability to act with this compassion. Because I doubt anybody listening to this would deny that, if you ask for something that you were given in
Yep.
2020 that worked, that worked, your doctor knows worked, on what grounds and in what world would we not grant it to you again in 2022? Thomas, I really believe, that this needs to be focused on compassion, because this is the situation that we're setting right now. Is you're given access back in 2020, access is taken away. But as you're speaking here, like, this is something that 100% works, that your doctor knows 100% works. And quite frankly, at this point, the people at Health Canada should know that this 100% works for you based on what your doctor has shared. Yet they're still asking you to do a clinical trial to what? Find out if it works, because we already know that. And this is an absolute lack of compassion. And I doubt that any individual human would be able to deny you and to say no to you. But this is the problem with bureaucracy sometimes, is there is no one person responsible. And I really think this is why we must insist that the Minister of Health, at our top elected health official, take some sort of responsibility and leadership and act compassionately. And I know that Jean-Yves Duclos and Caroline Bennett are compassionate people. I'm wondering, what's your perspective on that, on the minister? What did you think of Patty Hajdu, and what do you think might be stopping Jean-Yves Duclos and Caroline Bennett from responding to you? Because it is up to them.
It is up to them. I would like to say right out of the gate that I am extremely grateful to Patty Hajdu. When you say that Jean-Yves Duclos is a compassionate person, I honestly haven't seen it myself, because we've never interacted, and I have never had that displayed to me personally. So it's possible that he's a great guy and very compassionate, but that is not what is being displayed and demonstrated. So I'm very grateful that Patty Hajdu, when she was the Minister of Health, had the courage and compassion to be able to actually act. And it is very refreshing to have a health minister who had that kind of courage to be able to do so. I really sincerely wish that Jean-Yves Duclos did have that kind of courage and compassion to be able to act on these types of things. But that isn't what has been demonstrated so far. It isn't a very complicated thing. Now, in saying that, I have been able to access these treatments through the special access program, and I have had to go out of country when I have not been able to access those. And it has really taxed my resources, I have to tell you. It has cost me thousands and thousands of dollars to be able to access treatments that I should be able to just do here in my home province, in my home. The trade-off for me being able to have this lowering of my anxiety has been financially incredibly difficult for us. And I would have to think it would be equally difficult for anybody else trying to access that. So, for me, if Minister Duclos had the courage to grant compassionate access, it would be not only incredibly good for my well-being and the well-being of others like myself, but also a much more financially viable option for them as well.
Absolutely, and I think that's why we have launched this, or that you and 7 other plaintiffs have launched this constitutional challenge. Is I believe that you and those people actually believe that it's not only going to be easier, but that it is a constitutional right of yours to be able to access it, just through your doctor, without having to reach out to a minister who, you're right, we don't know maybe if they're compassionate or not, courageous or not, because perhaps they just haven't been showed this material, right? Perhaps they don't even know that this is a ongoing request, and that's the point of this podcast, is to challenge that, is to get their attention, and certainly bringing the court case to them is a way to let them know that all we're looking for here is a bit of compassion. So maybe, do you think you could talk about the court case that you're involved in, what it's aiming to do, and why you think it may succeed?
Well, I guess a couple of points to what you have said. I'm not exactly famous, but I have been on the national news on more than one occasion, and I have been on a large number of podcasts. I've been in most of the national newspapers. So if Minister Duclos is not aware of my stance and my experience with this therapy, he would have to really be deliberately trying to avoid having a knowledge of that, I think, at this point. I've been very, very public on that. And, of course, having this case in court where we are directly bringing it to his attention, I really feel that the minister must be fully aware of this this medicine and its benefits to people. So I don't think this is a case of he's not aware of it. I don't think that's possible. In terms of why I'm bringing this forward, of course, it's an undeniable fact that this is effective. And this is a natural substance that has an incredibly high safety profile. It has a very proven track record with myself as an effective therapy. It works. And I don't believe that I should have to beg the government for me to have a quality of life. I don't see why anybody should have to do that. I really very sincerely believe that it is my right to not just live, but to have a quality of life as well. There's a difference between, being alive and actually living. A person can be on a life support system for a very extended period of time, but that doesn't mean that they're necessarily living. This medicine is an opportunity to not only help me while I'm alive, but to actually live.
Well, and that's, I think, famously said by, I think it was Janice, one of the other plaintiffs. I've got medical assistance in dying, but where's my medical assistance in living? Right? This for me is so important, an important tool to be able to live. Why not? So, I think you've got the law behind you, and I know the lawyers that are very much working pro bono on the case, and of course looking for funds and fundraising, that they are dedicated to this case because they agree too. They know that this is a winning case. It's just unfortunate that this is the way it has to go. That a government, the Canadians and doctors know that this is your right, but still you've got to take this to court just for the court case to be drawn out, and who knows, maybe there will be a hearing, maybe they won't, maybe they'll just fold and say, sure, we'll give you regulations, but that doesn't exactly help the people who need access now. And I bring that up because Nathan, who was involved in the last court case we brought, and it was 2 days before the hearing, because we were suing because the Section 56 wasn't being granted. And 2 days before the hearing, his exemption and the exemption of about 10 other patients were granted. And I'm afraid that that's what's going to happen here, and I just think that's very unfair.
Yeah. I think there's a very good chance that something like that could happen because obviously I believe that the weight of the law and precedence is very much behind us on this. That being said, it is, I think, important for us to recognize that change doesn't just spontaneously happen. There have to be impulses that cause change to happen. And perhaps this court case is the impulse that is necessary for the law to change to something that serves people better. And so I don't really think of this as so much us against them. It is us helping them to make the system better.
That is well said, and a very optimistic outlook on it. And I don't think you're wrong, Thomas. I actually don't. I always thought, even with Patty Hyju, that what we were doing was helping the minister act with courage.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's what life is about, is you put people in situations, you test them, and you figure out who they are. And Patty Hyju was a compassionate woman and a courageous minister who did the right thing. And we've got an opportunity here to test both Jean-Yves Duclos, the Minister of Health, and Caroline Bennett, his Assistant Minister of Mental Health and Addictions. And I presume we'll find out exactly what kind of ministers they are. And I can only hope that with the help of the Canadian public, the media, with the people listening to this, that we can get to those ministers sooner rather than later, and get a compassionate response from them before, 2024 or 2025, whenever this case, is due to wrap up if there is no involvement. So I really appreciate your outlook. It's a positive one. And it certainly does signal that, the system and country isn't completely broken. But nonetheless, there is a problem here. And I'm happy that you're helping fix that. That's all the questions I had for you, but I wanted to see if there's any closing statements or remarks that you'd like to make.
Well, I think it would be important for me to say that I have been extremely lucky through all of this. So I have been lucky to be somebody who has been granted access and who has been able to have successful treatments on more than one occasion. It is really, really important to say that people shouldn't have to be lucky to have good health care. That is something that is just one of our rights, and it should be something that is just freely given and available to everybody. Not everybody is as lucky as I have been in the treatment with their cancer, with their depression, with their anxiety, with all of these things. And by changing the laws to make this therapeutic access to psilocybin available to more people, we are removing the element of luck from people's well-being, and we're making it just the normal status quo for people, and that's what I would like people to have.
Absolutely. Equality, right? Why, I'm so happy that you have access, but why do you get access through Section 56 and not Janice and not Bruce, right? Not Jesse. This should be equal.
You shouldn't have to be lucky enough for somebody to feel sorry enough for you to be compassionate. It's just your right to be healthy.
Well said, Thomas. Well, thank you so much for joining this podcast and really for all the advocacy that you do. We've been working together on this for almost 3 years.
It's been a while, yeah.
Yeah, it's been a while, and I'm happy to hear that you've been able to access 6 treatments. Let's make sure that that's still available to you, and let's make sure that hopefully that's available through regulations. Thank you so much, Thomas. A pleasure as always to speak with you.
Always happy to chat with you, Spencer. It's been a good ride.
Wonderful. And for anyone out there listening who would like to be able to donate to support Thomas's challenge to the Minister of Health, you can go to www.therasil.ca and donate to the court case. I think we just closed it with about $100,000. It's been fundraised so far, which has been a great start. But we'll probably be opening another $100,000 fundraiser to get us into the new year. So anyone who can support, the small donations matter.
You are not just helping me, you are helping yourself.
That is true. Alrighty. Thank you so much, Thomas.